Those new Marvel retro gaming shirts from Uniqlo sure are cool, aren't they? But where do they come from? Hey, Chris Baker here. If the advertising for your Facebook and Twitter algorithms is anything like mine, then you no doubt saw this ad promoted by Uniqlo in the latter part of summer 2019. The ad really stood out to me, not only as a fan of retro superhero video games, but also as a fan of authenticity. Superhero video game t-shirts with a retro gaming aesthetic are nothing new, but it's rare that actual graphics from actual games have been part of this. And for the most part, the Uniqlo collection is entirely accurate to actual games that did exist in the 1990s, even the 80s in one particular case. But what were these games? Some I knew right off the bat, others I had to do some research on, but in all cases, the games themselves are never mentioned. That's why I'm here. Let's start with one of the two shirts I actually did purchase for myself, and it's the one that continues to totally stump me.
Wolverine.
While this shirt totally does look like it could be the title screen for a 1990s Wolverine video game, it's not. You won't see it on NES, you won't see it on Sega Genesis, and you won't see it on Super Nintendo. Where you will see it in a much more realistic and less digitized form is the cover of Astonishing X-Men #1. This comic came out in 2004, well after the 16-bit era, and what we see on the shirt also doesn't appear to be part of a Nintendo DS or Game Boy Advance game. I'm inclined to think it's actually a variant cover for a Wolverine comic, not unlike these from the very awesome Matthew Waite. The only other shirt that just completely stumps me here is this rather simple Captain America one. I mean, would you even know that shield is from a video game? Maybe it isn't. If you happen to recognize that sprite, please let me know in the comments. This Captain America one is much cooler anyway, and it's obviously from Captain America and the Avengers along with Iron Man here. The only thing that keeps me from getting these shirts, with all due respect, Tony Stark, you are player number 2. Who wants to identify themselves as player 2 on a t-shirt anyway? Arriving to arcades just a little bit after Captain America and the Avengers was Konami's X-Men. This shirt combines in-game character art with the actual joystick and button layout on the game. Of course, everyone knows this was a 6-player game if you went to the right arcade, so my condolences to all Nightcrawler and Dazzler fans out there.
X-Men.
As an X-Men fan, these next two shirts really piqued my interest and really confused me. Let's just look at the fronts of these shirts first of all. It's the X-Men logo. More specifically, it's the Konami X-Men logo. You're not going to find the X-Men logo looking quite like this in any other X-Men game. Which is why it's so odd to see character sprites from X-Men Mutant Apocalypse, a Super Nintendo game from Capcom, on the backs of these shirts. Both are very fine games that I like a lot, but putting them together is just weird and it doesn't feel right. Imagine a Spider-Man movie shirt where it's the Raimi movie logo on the front and Tom Holland on the back. I love them both, but I don't want them both on the same shirt. Just feels kinda dirty, right? Anyway, the hero version is straight out of the game's opening, and the image itself, of course, is based directly on one of the greatest comic book covers of all time by Jim Lee. Definitely the best-selling one. The villain version, however, is cobbled together from 3 different points in the game, but you'll never get another chance to wear Omega Red on your butt. Fun side note, I learned about this whole thing through a tweet by my friend Josh at Panels to Pixels. The guy modeling this shirt is basically his own personal Ben Reilly. And Uniqlo didn't stop with X-Men when it came to Capcom art. The logo on the front of this shirt is definitely what you'll see when you boot up Marvel Superheroes War of the Gems for Super Nintendo, minus the subtitle of course. And on the back you've got the 4 protagonists. Actual game sprites of Captain America, Iron Man, Spider-Man, and the derpiest looking Hulk in the history of video games. Looking the exact opposite of derpy, and also keeping with the Capcom theme, is the back of this shirt for Venom. The scene you see here could have happened in either Marvel vs. Capcom 1 or 2, and it's awesome. These games had some of the flat-out best 2D animation of any video games ever, and they still hold up incredibly well today. You know what doesn't hold up well, though? The phrase, "come at me, bro." I mean, I guess it's kind of clever that they've turned it into "come at me, Brock" on the front of the shirt, but at the end of the day, I can't help but think of this terrible, awful, completely out-of-character Superman shirt that all the Walmarts and Kmarts and Targets carried a few years ago. For those of us just wanting a simpler take on Venom, we can go with this Maximum Carnage-inspired shirt, which uses his face from the game's opening, and a Spider-Man using his spider sense that, well, I'll be honest, I don't know where it's from. But some unlicensed tie on Zazzle uses it too. Anybody know what this is? And speaking of Spidey, we have the second of these shirts that I actually purchased myself. And it's actually kind of an epic story in finding out where it comes from. Years ago, my friend Brett Elston tweeted this image to me, asking if I knew where this image came from. I just assumed it was from War of the Gems or something and didn't think much of it. I told him I didn't know for sure. And I didn't see the image again until I saw this shirt. For a while there, I was kind of excited. I was like, all I really need to do is figure out where this actual screenshot came from that Brett sent me so long ago. But it didn't take too long to figure out that this whole thing is fabricated. The screenshot does not actually exist, at least not as we see it here. It seems that this is a bit of a meme that somebody manufactured a few years ago, and it kind of caught on with certain people because I guess it's just so weird. When would Spidey ever say something like, "Real paradise lies eternally in the person who dreams of it"? I mean, bad translation was a dime a dozen in the 90s, but this still was weird to me, so I just typed that into Twitter to see what came up, and I figured out it's actually from a game called Aztec Adventures on the Sega Master System. If you beat that game, this cute kid says something to that effect. There's even the word "that," which has just been straight up removed, and the rest of the phrase has been implanted onto that particular piece of art. But where does that Spidey pose come from? It actually first reminded me of the Sega Genesis game where if you're idle, he'll just kind of cross his arms like that and look kind of like a badass. You don't really see him pose like that very often. But I did find out through some digging that it comes from the back of the Superman vs. the Amazing Spider-Man comic from 1976. And more importantly, for the purpose of this shirt, that pose was your reward for beating Spider-Man: The Revenge of the Sinister Six on NES, Sega Master System, and Game Gear. But that's not all. There's also this little Spider-Man crawling on the back. I figured maybe it was from the same game or one of the 90s games. No. This image comes from the graphic adventure game from 1984 called Quest Probe featuring Spider-Man. Whoever went digging for these sprites dug really, really deep. And I kinda love them for it. Except for the whole X-Men thing, but I can get over that. Overall, this is the most I've ever cared about superhero-related fashion since Rob Liefeld wore some 501 jeans in a Levi's commercial. The link to buy these is in the description. I don't get any cuts or anything, just thought you'd like to know. Hold on, wait a second. As I was cutting this video, I learned that there are actual similar shirts like these on Amazon, and I do get a cut from that, so if you want to use that link, be my guest. You'll help support this channel. Until next time, everybody.